Welcome Narrative Enneagram members and friends and community. Welcome to those who are joining us on social media to this webinar. This is the second webinar that we've offered through the Narrative Enneagram in this uncertain time that we're living in. The Narrative Enneagram, for those of you who don't know, is an educational nonprofit whose focus and work is to transform lives and to create a more compassionate world. And we do this through the study and teaching of this powerful system of the Enneagram. Today's webinar, we're going to be talking about and focusing on millennial approaches and millennial engagement with the Enneagram in this age of the coronavirus. My name is Chris Copeland. I am a certified Enneagram teacher through the Narrative Enneagram since 2014. I also am a spiritual director. I teach spirituality at Wake Forest University School of Divinity, and also am privileged to be adjunct faculty with the Narrative Enneagram as well. So for today's webinar, we have three guests that I will introduce to you, and really we're going to be talking about how our Enneagram type is showing up and what resources we might have for that in this time. So I want to welcome Chichi Agorom, who is a psychotherapist and in Denver, Colorado. Wesley Nichols, who's a licensed marriage and family therapist in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and Abby Robbins, who is a certified yoga therapist in Austin, Texas. And each of these folks have studied with the narrative tradition. Wesley and Abby are certified TNE teachers, and Chichi is working on her certification. So welcome to all of you guests. Thanks for being here today. Also with us today is Evangeline Welch, who is the marketing director of TNE, and Evangeline is going to be helping us navigate all the technology and the chats today. Speaking of which, if you're watching and would like to ask a question, we're going to have some time at the end for questions. If you'd like to ask a question, you can do that in the Q&A part of the Zoom platform, or you can also do that in the chat as well. In today's webinar, we're going to be doing, just to give you a little overview of what we'll be doing, we're going to start with an inner practice as a way to ground and support us. I've then got some questions that I'm going to ask the panelists to reflect on together. And then we'll hear questions from you, those of you who are on our Zoom call. And then we'll have a closing where I'll offer a reading at the end. So that's what we're going to be doing today. I want to begin then with a time of centering, a time of inner practice. So I will invite you in whatever way that you can, wherever you are, to find a way to support your body. And that might be in a chair, it might be standing, it might be sitting on the floor, but in whatever way you can, just simply notice the physicality of the space that you're taking up. And if your feet can, maybe they'll touch the floor as a symbol, an expression, an energetic grounding. You may wish to close your eyes or simply soften your gaze, whatever feels most comfortable for you. And as we sit together, I invite you to simply notice the breath. And as you breathe in, allow your attention to follow the breath. Our attention can be out among all of the things happening in our world or in our families or in our communities. And this is a moment to bring that attention inward. And one way we do that is simply by following the breath. So as you breathe in, allow your attention to come inward. As you breathe in, allow your mind to be cleared. As you breathe in, allow your heart to open. As you breathe in, allow your body to be grounded. This moment is a perfect moment, for we are here. Simply breathe and be present. As you continue to breathe, notice your belly. Notice the belly center, the gut center. Just notice what's happening there, bringing your attention there, and breathe into the belly. And as you continue to breathe, notice the heart center. Notice your heart and breathe into that space and simply notice. And as you continue to breathe, breathe into the head, to that head space. Just breathe there and simply notice. And now, in an effortless way, breathe in all three centers: heart, head, body. Just breathe into the fullness of who you are in this moment. And as you continue to breathe, you may begin to gently draw your attention more outward. You may notice your feet on the floor. You may notice your body supported in whatever way it's supported. Feel that. Become aware of the front of your face. And as you're ready, I invite you to open your eyes and breathe fully into this moment with one another. Thank you all. So, again, just a word of welcome and thanks, Abby and Wesley and Chichi, for being here today. I want to start hearing from you, hearing from your wisdom and experience in these last weeks and maybe even months at this point, as we've been engaging coronavirus and quarantine and all the things that we have been encountering as we keep throwing out words: unprecedented, uncertain times. I get a little tired of those words sometimes. We don't know what else to say, right? But I'd love to hear from you how you're noticing during these times, how your Enneagram type might be showing up, and what have you noticed about that, or what have you noticed maybe about some struggles, just to share some wisdom of what your experience has been. So I'd like to start with you, Abby, if you're willing to begin.
Yeah, of course. Leading with type 8, I would say it's been extremely challenging to have such a lack of control. I don't know if you can hear, but my neighbor has decided to start mowing his lawn. Our small 14-year-old dog is currently scratching at the door because he wants to go out. And I'm currently on my porch because that is really the only space that I can, as close to guarantee that I won't be interrupted by our many animals or our two small children or my fiance. And even in that, having kind of the unexpectedness of neighbors and animals, it's very challenging. My normal routines have been completely thrown off, and I find that that's very difficult. It's very challenging for me. And I would say, I think it's interesting doing this today because this is also probably one of the worst days that I've had thus far. Yeah. It's totally fine, thank you. My neighbor's checking in. So at some point you really have to laugh.
Totally.
Because it's absolutely absurd. And in all of this, like, really, I was saying, of all of the days that we could be doing this webinar and I could be sitting out here on my porch, this is easily the day where I'm having the hardest time. I am the most agitated, and my type is kind of the most, like, right there at the surface, feeling a lot of anger and frustration. And I think really just kind of the day in and day out uncertainty of it, and the day in and day out lack of control, even in my own personal experience. Like, I can't control how much energy or how much capacity I have to do the things on my to-do list, or to show up and parent and educate kids, or whatever it might be. So I would say overall, that's really where, where things are the most challenging for me at the moment.
Wow. Thank you, Abby. Thanks for sharing that. And I just appreciate your vulnerability in this moment, really.
Yeah, there's not much else to do.
Yeah, and I acknowledge, I think it's just lovely that your neighbor spoke to you in the midst of this, because this is also part of the nature of the world we're living in right now with technology. And so thank you very much for sharing that. Yeah. Let me ask Wesley, similar question. What are you noticing, Wesley, for you as you're in your type, and how is it showing up right now? What are you struggling with, or what's challenging for you?
Yeah, I can echo some of the things that Abby said as far as the lack of control. But probably one of the biggest things for me is kind of this pressure to really make this time be valuable in a certain type of way, right? And I lead with type 3, and so there's a certain level of productivity that I can feel my type pressuring me into. And I feel like I've been able to, I guess, withstand in a way some of that pressure, but it's constant, like that in the back of my kind of head and heart, this feeling of, okay, you need to do more, right? You need to produce in this time. You have more space than maybe you do in other points. And I think that's something that has been pretty present for me through this process. And it doesn't help that now I'm mostly working from home, right? So what once used to be kind of the place that I could go and, okay, this is a place where I've set boundaries, and it's a place where I can kind of be present to myself and to my wife and to my home. Now there's this kind of work and different elements being brought to that space as well. And so this transition from kind of being productive to being able to be to rest and to be able to kind of find in the midst of this some type of like peace and calm. It's been difficult. And I think those two things have been probably the biggest kind of challenges for me through this.
Yeah, thank you, Wesley. It's so striking that drive to produce that the 3 can take on, and how that connects with being at home, right? It's like, because you're at home now, it's like there's almost no refuge from that in a way. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. Good. I'll shift now to Chichi, and Chichi, talk about what your experience has been like.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to both Abby and Wesley's experiences. And as a person who leads with type 4, my tendency is to, because I'm comfortable, I can be more comfortable with discomfort and pain than other people. I take on more of it than is necessary. So in this time that is, collective anxiety, collective trauma, for all of us, I have been noticing myself. I'm on week 4 of quarantine and working from home, which, to go off of what Wesley was saying, is such an interesting balance now, because I had a routine with work where I live really close to work, so I get to walk to my office, which is amazing. But then my walk home after seeing clients is kind of like my process, think about all that stuff, process through it, and then leave it as soon as I get home. But then now all that's here with me, and I'm holding, 20-something people's anxiety as well as mine during this time where none of us know what we're doing. So my type structure in terms of the unnecessary suffering, my story in my particular expression of 4-ness is that I earn love and I earn approval and acceptance and belonging by proving that I am strong enough to handle hard things. That's always been my story growing up. That's been my story with family experiences, with trauma, with life in general, and life has been difficult for me. So it's just part of that identity of I have to be strong enough to be able to hold all of this stuff, meanwhile feeling isolated and alone and terrified and not really reaching for help. So a thing that I have noticed and has been challenging over the last 4 weeks has been noticing the amounts of shame that come up when I have reached for help, because it goes against my story of I should be capable of processing through this stuff. I'm a 4, I'm a therapist, life is, I should be able to do this without needing help. Part of it, what's been difficult also is the 4 narrative of being on the outside of connection and belonging. So a lot of the people I know and I care about and love are partnered or have kids or have roommates. I live alone. So it's a literal aloneness in the midst of this isolating period. And so then I started noticing the stories around the loneliness and the abandonment, but also the stories around deserving it, right? Being undeserving of connection that's like tied to the 4 type structure and the 4 story. So I'd say those are some of the bigger themes that have come up for me over the last month.
Yeah. Thank you, Chichi. As somebody who leads with 4, I certainly identify and relate to a lot of that. The question, one thing you said that struck me, and I want to kind of throw this back to all of you, is this question of shame around asking for help. So I'm just curious, what's asking for help been like in this time for each of you? And Chichi talked a little bit about this. I don't know, Abby and Wesley, if you want to jump into that at all.
Yeah, I haven't. That's really playing into the type 8 structure. And I say that kind of jokingly. I haven't really asked for help outside of kind of my immediate family. Like with my partner, we've been doing a really good job at communicating, and I feel really grateful about that. But it's hard, and I'm, our household has been affected to the point that very soon we need to start asking for more help and support from our family, our community, etc., because we've been so affected. And I can feel my resistance to that, and I very much resonate with what Chichi was saying about my story and my type structure tell me I'm supposed to be able to do this on my own. I can't depend on other people. And I feel grateful that I've had a lot of opportunity to work with that voice in the past before this situation, because if this were my first kind of contact with it, I think it would be a lot more daunting. But that's something that is on the horizon that I will have the opportunity to work with very soon.
Thanks, Abby. Wesley, anything you want to add?
Yeah, no, I definitely can relate to a lot of that. Yeah, it was interesting for me when a lot of this happened. I just found myself and probably where a lot of my attention has gone initially was actually towards the instinctual drives that show up for us. And the dominant one for me is self-preservation. And man, in the first few weeks of all of this kind of starting, that's exactly where I went, into this self-preservation mode for like me and my family. And for me, reaching out for help or for support, that just wasn't even on my radar. And I think for me, in that self-preservation mode, stability, security, my routines, my rhythms, the things that are like safe for me were kind of taken. And not just for me, but for so many people. And there was a loss there that I was like reaching out to help to anyone else who was like, no, this is something I have to kind of figure out. And it's interesting, as the weeks progressed, some of those things began to kind of change, noticing, okay, I do need to kind of reach out, tapping into these other instincts. And there's been more intentional effort, but that's not an easy thing at all, kind of for me. And it's been more, I think, at times through gritted teeth, right? Than it being something where I'm like, oh man, like this is definitely what I want to reach out and do right now. But I will say I've seen kind of the benefits of being able to do that. And I think especially in this time, that's something that we really need. I don't want to say necessarily get comfortable with. I think that'll take a while to get comfortable with it, but at least in spite of maybe some of the tension and in spite of maybe it being something hard, us being able to kind of push through that. And it becomes something that is more comfortable for us.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing the instinctual subtypes into the conversation, Wesley, and because that certainly is playing out for all of us in different ways. I'm also thinking about how there's just this kind of deep irony, I suppose, about, I don't know if that's the right word, but we're quarantined, right? And we so need, as human beings, connection. And yet there's this isolation that we're experiencing. And we certainly get glimpses and tastes of connection with others, whether it's people that we're on Zoom with, or sometimes for some of us, somebody that we might live with. But boy, it's not quite the same thing. So I'm wondering what things that you might be doing, each of you, to support you during this time. Are there ways in which your type actually might be helping you or supporting you in certain ways? And we don't have to stick this with type, but what are some practices or resources that you found that have helped you in some of these challenges that you've named? So I'll just throw that open, whoever wants to go.
I can go. I think one of the ways my type has helped me is because there is, like I mentioned at the beginning, a level of comfort with discomfort and with pain and with struggle, both personally with my friends, with my clients. I'm able to hold more space for the intensity of this experience without it feeling overwhelming or too overwhelming. And in the ways that it's not helpful, as far as like the story, for example, a practice for me has just been reminding myself that it really is just a story that my type tells, that it's not the objective reality. And for me, part of asking for help has looked like, I have really good friends who are like family to me, and there's space for me to be at their house. But for the last month, it was, that same story of, well, no, I should be able to handle this, and I should be able to, everyone else is doing it. I'll be fine, and I'm not fine. So asking for help looks like, hey, can I come quarantine with you? Which is going to happen this week. And putting aside, noticing the shame that comes with that, and being present with that old story while not letting it be in the driver's seat. Also a gratitude practice, which has existed long before this, but has also been keeping me grounded, the knowledge that both things can be true at the same time, which I think is a gift that a lot of fours have, of that ability to live in that middle space as opposed to the binary. So this is a horribly awful time, and there are lots of little glimmers of light everywhere if we look. So that's been part of my practice, is to try and look for little bits of light each day. I also try to dance a lot, as much as possible. Move my body in ways that feel good. But also there's a practice that I do a lot with clients, and I do with myself, of going through the 4 core emotions of anger, fear, sadness, and joy. But rather than going with the story of those emotions, really it's a somatic practice to find where you're holding those in your body in the moment. So what am I feeling angry about today? And then looking for the sensation. And then just allowing it to be there and asking it what it needs. And then with fear and the sadness and with joy. But I think of that as kind of like opening the release valve each day, rather than I want to pretend that those things aren't there. But I'm holding anger today, I'm holding fear today, I'm holding sadness today, and I'm holding joy today. So that practice has been really helpful. Sometimes I do it in like a, eyes closed, meditating stance, but sometimes I journal, I write it out. And then as I'm writing, noticing what's happening in my body as I'm writing about my frustrations, or what I'm feeling sad about, or what I'm feeling anxious about. And just really allowing what's there to be there. The universal growth process with the Enneagram has been helpful for me as part of that process of just noticing what's there, allowing it to be there, as opposed to trying to fix it, change it, shift it, make it go away. So.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Thank you. The image that comes to me as you say that is the word, I shared this on the webinar we did a couple of weeks ago, but the word I've been literally dreaming about, like literally it's coming in my dreams, is the word acceptance, which is what you named, Chichi. And like, can I just accept what is? And what's hard about that, of course, in Enneagram Life, we talk about this, acceptance doesn't mean approval, right? It doesn't mean like, ooh, this is good, let's keep going, right? But it's just acknowledging what is, and where our tendency, I think, at least I'll claim this for myself, is to resist. And so I'll be spending energy kind of resisting or constricting. And there's something about this acceptance which can free up some of the energy that I hear you talking about. So beautifully said. Abby or Wesley, you want to respond?
Yeah, I think a few of my other 8 friends and I have been joking about how grateful we are to do our quote unquote slide to 5 in this kind of stressful time. Because both being an 8 and being sexual instinct dominant, I need projects. I want some place to funnel this massive amount of energy that I'm carrying with me. And so much of my daily routine is structured around those things, and now most of that is gone. So I've been using that 5 energy that comes in times of kind of stress or feeling like I need to kind of retreat from the world, and channeling it into learning a bunch of random things, taking on projects where I don't necessarily know what I'm doing at the beginning, but I figure it out by the end. Built some garden beds, we got a new grill, I've been learning how to do video editing, and I have a list on Twitter right now that's just categorizing all of the things that I've been learning in this time, because I really need some sort of container for the energy that I'm feeling. And so I feel really grateful for that, and that is a way that I feel like my type has really lent itself to something that is enriching in a time that feels really uncertain and unprecedented, all those words that you don't like hearing anymore. But I would say practices that I have, movement is a big thing for me, both being in the body center, but also as a yoga therapist. Maintaining my practice as much as I can right now has been really important. But I also have to carry with that the practice of grace of letting myself off the hook for the days when I don't have it. I mean, I'm normally get up and hit the ground running, and the last several weeks have been really challenging in that respect. And so cultivating a sense of, like you said, acceptance around those things has been really powerful and really helpful, because I think without that piece, I would be in a lot harder spot, just because of the shame and the fear and the frustration and the things that pile up when I feel like I don't have what I need to do the things that actually support me. And so I've had to make a lot of adjustments, practicing being more fluid and more responsive instead of as rigid and as structured as I usually like to be. And so those are the things that, practicing that kind of fluidity has been really helpful in kind of keeping me in honestly more alignment with the reality of what's going on around me, instead of what I feel like I should be doing in all of that. So yeah.
Thank you. Wow, it's the image of I love the image of fluidity, because often and some of it's a stereotype and some of it's true about eights are kind of a force, right? There's a force, or there's, or certainly, there's obviously that kind of strength and this fluidity, this kind of going with. And I love how you describe it's what's happening in the world. I mean, the world is, every day, right, we hear something new. There's a new piece of information. There's a new something. And so the sort of the way we've understood structure or stability is shifting. And so I'm so grateful for that image of fluidity that my 8th friend Abby can teach me. So thank you. What about you, Wesley?
Yeah, I think for me, just the Enneagram as a whole has given me kind of clues into what to be looking for, right, internally going on with me, as far as some of the tendencies with my type 3 and some of these instinctual drives. And so it's been helpful to kind of notice, and then channeling, right, some of that energy for the type 3 is I was able to kind of really take some time to be intentional with, okay, there is so much change, so much crisis. There is this kind of greater sense of trauma that we're all collectively going through. But in it, there was also this opportunity and an ability to kind of begin to be intentional about the ways that we do want to respond. And so I think in my list making mode, right, I was able to really kind of sit down and be like, what do I want to kind of really be anchors kind of for me? Not just practice wise, but also like there's going to be, I don't know if there's going to be a going back to how things were completely. I think this is really going to change things in general. And while there might be parts of kind of life that go back to some semblance, I think things are changed. But what are maybe some of the good and the enriching kind of things that not only for myself, but also for the people around me that we can kind of really tap into? And so I think really trying to kind of outline that has been really helpful kind of for me. But then to what Abby said, I think being able to accept that grace when it's not like I'm necessarily living into that, because it's hard. And this isn't just me, this is all of us. And so even if I kind of have these things that I think are good and anchors and direction for kind of how I want to engage with the reality that's present, there's going to be times when some of these old patterns or old ways of being are going to show up, and being able to be accept that grace, right, and to make room for that, and trusting that in the end, like this kind of direction is going to come. And so for me, that's something I think I've been trying to kind of hold to, and as well as like they've each said, as far as even just some practices. So I have some of these anchors, but what are the things I need to kind of ground me in those? So as far as mindfulness and things like that, to when I find myself fluttering away into the kind of concerns and worries that are so easy to do, especially with the particular type that I am, how can I kind of come back to what is, to what's present internally, but then also kind of in the environment around me? And so I think those are things that I'm trying to keep in mind. Yeah, kind of in the midst of this.
Thank you, Wesley. It's interesting, just the name. We don't have to go down this path, but each of you name in different ways. The issue of shame comes up in different ways, in terms of doing or whatever comes up in terms of identity. So I'm just want to kind of acknowledge that, and appreciate the work that you all are intentionally doing, and recognizing that we have the importance of grace, because we're gonna, as you name, Wesley, fall back into the patterns, because we do that anyway, right? much less in a fairly chaotic context in which we find ourselves. So yeah, it's sort of an amazing opportunity to practice that. Yeah, I mean, that's not necessarily consolation, but it's just true. So one of the things that comes up for me, as I'll share, just to kind of name in my own experience, is when I keep track, you name this, Chichi, about kind of gratitudes. And this is a good practice for all of us, I think, us fours particularly. But one of the things I've noticed is I've had friends get together. Last Friday, I think it was, we had friends that played Cards Against Humanity online, right? So there's this online way you can do this. And we did Zoom and we played. And it was like, I haven't laughed so much in a while, because there's been the intensity of all of this. And like, I didn't want to hang up the Zoom call, right? Because we're just delighting in each other and playing and laughing. And so there's something about that for myself as a reminder of a practice for me, is how can I laugh more? How can I be playful in the midst of this to help me ground myself as well? So I want to ask another question, and this one's kind of a broader question. It's in light of what we've been sharing, but it might be beyond what we've been sharing. But I'm really curious, because each of you, being in a millennial generation, and I realize we use those words, we throw those around quite a bit, and it can mean lots of different things. But you certainly are of a different age than I, as a 51-year-old, and a number of folks who've been teaching in this Enneagram community for a while. I want to hear your wisdom about, kind of from your perspective, generationally. What do you think that you kind of bring to this awareness and this conversation? B, what's your sense of how the Enneagram might be a helpful tool or something to support folks who are your colleagues, your friends, your community? So I'm going to kind of throw that out there and just see where it goes. But I'm just so curious about this millennial perspective, and I'd love to hear any thoughts you might have about that.
I can kind of start. I think the kind of the piece about how is the Enneagram like helpful in all of this, and how are we kind of responding to this as a generation? I think first off, while this is like deeply challenging for everyone involved, there's something I think very natural and easy about the way that people in my generation stay connected with one another. Like the shifts seem to be easier, like connecting via Zoom or Marco Polo or text or FaceTime or whatever it is. That doesn't feel as difficult. And so I think that there's a real gift in that. Like we set up a Zoom, like my fiance's parents, we got them on their very first Zoom call yesterday so that they could Zoom with our kids. And so, things like that, it's like, while I think overall it's kind of a big adjustment switching to how we're interacting with people, I think generally my generation is fairly prepared to do that, just familiar with technology, etc. But when I think about it from an Enneagram perspective, I think in general, our generation is very much interested in, quote unquote, looking behind the curtain, like why are things happening the way that they are? And we do have an interest in, discovering more about ourselves internally. And the Enneagram is such a helpful tool for that, because it's not simply kind of putting a mask on something or putting somebody in a box, but really allowing us to kind of peel back and look deeper. And it's a really great kind of scaffolding for that journey inward. And so, I think that's why there's so much more interest all of a sudden, having kind of this young explosion. And it really is helpful because so many of us have this desire, especially in times like these, where there's kind of a sense that we need to move internally. But it's so helpful to have that framework and that scaffolding.
Thank you. Thanks, Abby. That this again, the image of peeling back the layers. That feels resonant with what I have experienced, and it's a beautiful way and a commitment to do that inner work. And Enneagram's a great tool for that. So thank you for what y'all bring, you and others in your cohort of generations. Thank you. Chichi or Wesley, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I can add a little to that. Yeah, I do think there is kind of, and kind of this millennial, my generation, this desire to peel those layers back and to be more introspective and to see kind of what's happening behind the curtain, as Abby said. I think I'm noticing the temptation with that to kind of look to the Enneagram as a sense of identity. I think in particular with maybe some of the millennial generation. And so I think for me, and I think especially when I first was introduced to the Enneagram, struggled with that as well. Because I mean, the Enneagram's fascinating. Like it is just on its own, like the nuances, the intricacies, like you could get lost in just studying this system, and it really is just wonderful. But I heard someone, I think it might have been Russ Hudson, kind of allude to something about we can get so caught up in the map that we lose track of the territory, right? And the territory is ourselves and what's actually going on internally. And that has really stuck with me because I think the temptation with such an amazing system that can really highlight so much is to get stuck on that, on the map, as opposed to, okay, how is this actually playing out and showing up inside of me? And that's where the work is at. And that's where the power of the Enneagram truly is found. And so I think for me, that's taking that desire for introspection and being able to use the Enneagram to see it for what it is as a map and not as the end all be all. That's kind of something that I definitely want to kind of encourage my fellow millennials and kind of with the Enneagram.
So beautifully said, Wesley. Thank you. I don't really want to say anything else because that was well said. Thank you. Chichi.
Yeah, I agree with that. And just along the same themes, I think my generation is we're collectively really good at distracting ourselves from reality, from being present with our actual selves, whether that's with technology, whether there's so much going on, and it's our norm, separate from being in a pandemic, it's just our norm to be constantly involved in or looking at or connected to, or there are many ways to distract from being present. And now we're all collectively forced to be with ourselves because we can't go do other things and distract ourselves as well as we used to. So I think that a really helpful thing I tend to think of our types as like armor. It's like what we put on, right, to protect from pain and protect from suffering, but it's not who we are. And my hope is that as we're forced to be with ourselves during this season, that the Enneagram can offer a pathway to people being able to create more space between this is me, this is the armor. I'm being present with me. I'm not just wielding this armor to protect myself from pain and suffering, which we will all do, as we've talked about in this already. This is a stressful time. So naturally, we're going to want to protect ourselves from even more stress and pain. And there's an invitation to be more present with who we are, who we actually are, at our core and our essence, and not just what we do to survive.
Thank you. It reminds me that I love the armor image, and also you mentioned before, Chichi, the story, like kind of identifying with the story that we tell. And this is the time to pay attention to essence. So thank you. Beautifully said. So I want to shift our time now to see what questions that folks who have been a part of this webinar might have for each of you to glean more wisdom from you. So Evangeline, you want to help us with some questions?
Yes, and I first just want to express my gratitude for all of your grounded presence today. Just really beautiful to hear your honesty and your depth, and I'm grateful to be a part of this. I have a question from someone. We actually have 3 heart types and 1 body type on our panel today. So we have a question about a sense of head types and how are they dealing with the issues and what comes up for clients that might be head types. So Chichi, why don't I start with you as in terms of your practice with clients? Maybe you can help inform that discussion.
Sure. I'm not a head type, but I think that there is with some of the people I work with who are head types, you know, that sense of safety and security that's a core basic need for 5, 6, and 7s in general is really threatened right now. And so there's a lot of fear that maybe in other times it's easy for head types to kind of be unaware of. You know, it's like, I love collecting information, or I just like to be prepared. It's not because I'm scared. The fear is more on the surface, or closer to the surface these days. And so I think that same practice of being able to acknowledge what's there, especially the fear, and to let it be there without it being like fear isn't bad. There are so many different ways and narratives in which, you know, we hear that being afraid is bad, or being afraid is the opposite of being hopeful or being okay. But I think acknowledging that the fear is there, our brains are wired for survival, so they're trying to keep us safe. And now is a time that is confusing and feels unsafe. But then, as is true for all head types, like practices to help them come back into their bodies, right? Because a lot of the processing and the figuring out all happens up here. So those practices that can help you recognize that there's anxiety and fear, and then come back into your body in the present moment and find grounding. It's helpful for all of us, but probably especially so for head types who tend to live up here.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chichi. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add, or well, I'll move on to another question then. Wesley, you had spoken a little bit about how your self-pres, you were noticing what was going on with your self-pres. We didn't really check in with the other panelists about your specific subtype, but we have had a number of questions around subtype, and particularly what growth edges might be coming up as we deal with this crisis. So Abby, why don't we start with you?
My eyes got real big there about what our growth edges are in terms to, with our subtype. And I had mentioned I'm 1-to-1 or sexual dominant subtype. And I definitely have a self-pres blind spot, almost to the point of like non-existence. And so being somebody who's like has to be home all the time, I definitely feel the struggle to find any sense of like comfort in that, because it's very difficult for me. I would much rather be out in the world, and I would much rather be doing things, like I mentioned, you know, really needing to have projects. But it's been such a really great learning experience of how to be home and not completely lose my mind in the process. So I would say that that's really where I'm finding a lot of my growth, is that like learning how to find more comfort in this area of my life that I often don't give a lot of attention to.
Thank you. Would someone else like to talk about another subtype? What else do we have? Chichi?
I'm also a self-pres subtype, and so I'm kind of the stoic 4. And so a lot of my growth is in realizing, like I was saying at the beginning, part of being stoic is having that story of like, I'm strong enough to handle this. It's going to be fine. So really it's reaching, allowing myself to be supported, reaching for the connection that I actually need, that I block myself from when I stay in the stoic, I'm fine, because then there's no space, there's no receptivity to be held and to be supported when I present the image of, of being stoic, of having it under control. So.
Wonderful, thank you. One question that's also asked around for all of you is that you're all in the helping profession, and that you all each mentioned some difficulty that you're having around asking for help. And we talked about this a little earlier, but how are you working with that difficulty of when you realize that you need help and it's hard to you, particularly in this helping profession? How about Wesley, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it actually feels connected to the kind of my subtype. So the self-preservation 3, which is security, that's a big focus. And there's almost this sense of kind of autonomy, like I need to be the one who does it, who figures it out, and I should be able to kind of take it on. And so it's made reaching out for help so much more difficult than it already is. And I think it's interesting, a lot of how I, in my self-preservation way, structure my life is where I don't necessarily need to ask for help all that often. And this isn't an intentional thing, but it's almost kind of like it's just kind of being expressed in my life. Well, in this time, some of those kind of ways have been, those ways of kind of scaffolding my life have been taken away. And so it really has kind of forced me into this kind of reliance on other people. And in particular, kind of with my wife, but then also I think even with friendships. And it's been something that's not comfortable. It's interesting, being in the helping profession, it comes way more natural, right, to reach out to help as opposed to being the recipient of that. Like I'm very kind of accustomed to that place, right? But receiving it is just a completely different ballgame, and I feel the tension of it. I almost kind of get this imagery of like an icicle. Like I think I'm thawing, right? Like, and over time it's gonna kind of thaw, and I'm gonna begin to feel kind of, I guess, the relief or kind of the benefit from doing it. I don't necessarily know that I'm quite at that point yet. So being able to reach out, I'm not immediately like I have warm and fuzzies, like, okay, yes, I've been able to open up and kind of reach out for help, and now I've received this help and I feel great. Like I think it's a process, and it's a practice, I think, especially now, that I'm definitely recognizing in this time I need to be more intentional about, not just now, but beyond. But it's not easy.
Thank you, Wesley. Chichi or Abby, you want to weigh in on this?
I think I notice, my movement towards, as Abby said earlier, the slide. So my slide to 2. In moments like this, it's so much easier to focus on other people. So whether that's mostly my clients, but, or even like friendships, while ignoring what I actually need. So one of the things that helps me with that is something that I learned from Renee Rosario, who I think one of her teachers talks about the of course practice, right? Or not, well, that's not actually what I was thinking about. I was thinking about the neediness, like when a 2 is seeing the world as really needy and seeing everybody as really needy, it's actually probably more likely that you have needs you're ignoring. And so I've been noticing that a lot more for myself, or with myself, during this season of my attention and my energy going outwards as a way to escape from acknowledging that I am the one who is needy and I am the one who needs help. And so that's been kind of part of my work, is noticing when I start feeling that way to check in with, okay, what do I need right now? What am I ignoring in favor of showing up for other people? So.
Thank
Oh, sorry. I think for me, in like talking about needing help, the biggest and most helpful piece has been as an 8 looking at my defense mechanism, because it's so easy for me to assume that like I just don't need help. You know, like that denial runs really strong and runs really deep. And, you know, allowing myself to see that I am actually being affected by this situation is really kind of at the root of being able to ask for help. Because it's actually much easier for me to assume that like, this isn't bothering me. This isn't really affecting me negatively. I don't need help. I'm fine. I got it. But I mean, very few people in the world right now are quote unquote fine with everything that's going on. And so really working on that piece and really working on seeing the ways that I've been affected is really kind of the first step for me in like being able to ask for help, because it's so much easier for me to just blow past it. So that work around the defense mechanisms have been so helpful.
Thank you, Abby. And I'm going to end with one more question, and I'll ask this for Chris. So how do we sit with this when we feel this pressure to do something?
Yeah, you're asking me to respond. That's a great question. I think every type is going to perhaps do this in different ways. What I really resonate with is what Chichi shared about kind of allowing the feelings, the thoughts, whatever they are, to come into the body. Because I think the body is, I mentioned this, I think, in the opening meditation, but the centering, but the body is what is present. It's in the present moment, in the way that our minds and our feelings have a harder time because we attach stories and ideas to them. And there's something about grounding in our bodies that allow us to be present, so that we that helps mitigate that need to go, and it can help at least mitigate that need to go and do, but just be with. So can I notice? And truthfully, I'll speak for myself, like, gosh, how many times have I done something in the last 3 weeks to distract me because I don't want to feel whatever it is that I'm feeling, you know, a sadness or a hopelessness or whatever. So can I become aware of my need for distraction, or my tendency to distract, and then say, okay, Chris, what's going on? What are you feeling that you don't want to feel? Or what are you thinking? What can I be with? And allow that as to notice, what's the sensation in my body? Can I just be with that? And it's amazing how when we can be with it, I think many of us know this, you know, it then loses its power, it loses its energy, it dissipates. But we spend a lot of time resisting, and we tend to feed the monster when we do that. So that's just one idea I have. Yeah.
Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome. I want to say a word of deep gratitude to Abby and Wesley and Chichi. Thank you for sharing of your experience and your wisdom, and to use that powerful image of peeling back the layers, which you've done for yourselves in this time, for our listeners and for those who are watching this. Thank you. Thank you, Evangeline, for hosting us all the technology, which is such a gift that you can do that. I want to close us with a reading, and this is really kind of a blessing. It's written by a chaplain at the Cleveland Clinic Hospice. His name is Amar Dar, and this is a blessing that he has written in this time, and I want to offer it to you as a way to close. May we be as one now. May the breath of life fill each of our lungs and move our spirits together. May our hope spread further than all the fear. May our joy be heard in the sound of sorrow. May our surprise at a stranger's love surpass the alarm of the shuttered store. May our concern for the other overpower our apathy or regard for self. May our patience wait on our frustration. May our gratitude eclipse our grief. May our desire for the good overwhelm our disgust at the bad. May we see more calm in empty streets than we feel anger at this disease. May we rely on the strength of others where we feel weak. May we rest on the faith of others when we are uncertain. Though there is distance between our bodies, may we know a closeness of our souls. Though there is a number in our nations, may we be as one in our cause. May our thoughts be blessed, may our words be blessed, may our work be blessed. May the breath of life fill each of our lungs and move our spirits together. May we be as one now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And we're now at the end of today's webinar. Just wanted to let y'all know that we will be doing a series of gatherings starting next Tuesday morning, 10 a.m. Pacific, I believe. And we'll be having Terry Saraceno each week lead a meditation. And then we're going to be breaking out into small groups using the Zoom breakouts. So if you are on our mailing list and you're already receiving the invitations to our gatherings, you'll be getting one of those soon. And if you're not on our mailing list, if you're watching on Facebook Live, we will be also providing information on how you can learn more about it on our Facebook page. We will have a video of this recording available on Instagram. Please share it to the world, and we look forward to having you return many times again in this community. We're here for you, and thank you for being here for us.
Thank you all. Peace.